Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, thank you for joining our webinar today, Ask the Expert School Breakfast Edition. My name is Emily, and I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping items first. If you're having any problems with audio or connection, go ahead and chat your questions in the question box in the panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll be able to answer you directly. We'll also be answering questions throughout the webinar, the ones that you've submitted ahead of joining the webinar today, and ones that you have as we move forward through the presentation. So we're going to try something a little differently today. If you have a question, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen an option to raise your hand, and then I can go ahead and unmute you, and that way you can ask your question out loud. Or you can, if you don't feel comfortable asking your question out loud, you can still send your questions in the question box, and then I can send them over to my colleagues and we can make sure they get answered. If we do not get to all of the questions today, we will be able to follow up with you individually after the webinar, and we will be sending out a recording and a copy of the slides and some of the materials that we'll be presenting today after the webinar. So you'll be sure to get all of that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Summer.
Thank you, Emily. Welcome, everyone. I'm so pleased that you all have joined the call. This is what the next 45 minutes are going to look like. So we're going to do some introductions so you know who the experts are on the line. I'm going to talk just briefly about No Kid Hungry, just in case there's folks on the phone who don't know who we are as an organization and what we do. And then I'm going to do a little bit of level setting about breakfast after the bell basics, just so we're all on the same page in terms of terminology and what we mean when we talk about these models. And then really the bulk of the remaining time is going to be for your questions. And that's really the goal of this webinar, is to make sure you get those questions answered about your school breakfast program and about breakfast after the bell. So many of you submitted questions ahead of time, which is fantastic. I have a list of those questions here. And when we get to the question section, I will start off the question portion by reading those questions first. And then, like Emily said, we will dive into the additional questions that come up, either by using the raise your hand feature or typing your questions into the question box. So let's do a poll, because I'd love to know who is joining us today. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to let us know who is on the line today.
Okay, about 60% of you have voted so far. It looks like we've got 20% school nutrition directors, 10% cafeteria managers, 10% No Kid Hungry campaign staff, and 60% other. So we would love to know who the other are.
That's fantastic.
You could go ahead and type who you are in the question box, and that can help us get a sense of who's joining us today.
Fabulous. This is an exciting crowd. All right. So as we, as you tell us who the other category is, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Summer Kriegshauser. I'm a senior program manager here at No Kid Hungry. My focus is really on school breakfast expansion. So I work with schools and districts all across the United States to help them figure out the best ways to expand their breakfast program to meet the needs of the students and increase access. Through that, we found breakfast after the bell models are the most successful at doing that, and this is what No Kid Hungry heavily promotes, and this is what I will be talking about before the question and answer session. But that's really my role here, is to serve as a consultant providing technical assistance to schools and districts and those organizations who support schools and districts. And so I'm going to pass it off to the other expert on the line, Marla, to introduce yourself. Please welcome Marla Kaplan.
Thank you, Summer. This is Marla Kaplan. Currently, I'm the Director for Student Wellness Initiatives in Montgomery County, Maryland. Prior to this position, I was the Food Service Director in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a school district of about 163,000 students, about 35% of which are eligible for free reduced price meals. And we can make it work. We can make it work together. There's all kinds of different initiatives. 80 of our schools have breakfast in the classroom. Several of our schools have grab-and-go kiosks. And there's lots of creative ways to work towards increasing breakfast participation for our students.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Marla. All right. Let's talk just briefly about No Kid Hungry, just so everyone is aware. No Kid Hungry is a campaign by Share Our Strength. So Share Our Strength is the parent company, and No Kid Hungry is a campaign where we work to end childhood hunger throughout the United States and the world. And we really do it with three other campaigns / organizations. We have No Kid Hungry, Cooking Matters, and Community Wealth Partners. And like I indicated before, I am in our No Kid Hungry campaign working to expand school breakfast across the United States. And how do we do this? How do we end childhood hunger? Well, we know childhood hunger is an incredibly complex issue, but we know it's a solvable problem. And so we work to increase access to the federal meals programs that are already in existence. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We think we've got some great meals programs out there, and we want to capitalize on infrastructure that already exists. So we focus on expanding access to school breakfast, summer meals, and after-school meals. We also go into communities to teach families how to make the most of their food dollars. And then we work with elected officials to pass policy to move the needle on ending childhood hunger. And here's a map of everywhere that we are in the United States. And we're so proud of this because, as you can see, we are in every single state in the United States in some capacity. The orange is deep community investments. And then the yellow is No Kid Hungry grantees, meaning we're giving folks dollars to improve or expand their programs to get more hungry kids fed. And then I want to just talk a little bit about the Center for Best Practices. So within the No Kid Hungry campaign, we have our team, which I am on, called the Center for Best Practices. And this really provides the opportunity to learn what those best practices are, blast those best practices out to communities across the nation, schools and districts. We do resources. We do technical assistance in the form of one-on-one technical assistance. We do webinars such as this. We connect folks together to share best practices. So really, just like the name, the Center for Best Practices, this is where we discover where those solutions are that schools and districts can use to expand access and really get those hungry kids fed. Okay, so now that we've level setted about Share Our Strength and the No Kid Hungry campaign, let's quickly talk about breakfast basics. Okay, why is school breakfast such a big deal? Why are we talking about school breakfast today on this webinar? Because school breakfast has shown to have measurable impact on students' lives. We know that when kids have a healthy breakfast in the morning, they score higher on tests. As you know, oftentimes schools will provide breakfast to students during testing week. We believe that breakfast should be provided all weeks out of the year because we know it does have a measurable impact on student outcomes. We also know that it affects attendance, and we hear anecdotally all over the country that when you provide students with breakfast, the attendance rates goes up, and research shows that students attend 1.5 more days of school per year. And over the years, that adds up to a lot of days and just more opportunity to get excellent teachings and be a part of the school system. And then that together means that students have a 20% greater chance of graduation. So that is a big deal, and we like to promote that because that shows how much impact just the meal of school breakfast can have on the day-to-day lives of students. Okay, so I want to briefly touch upon traditional breakfast in the cafeteria. This does provide the opportunity for students to partake in the breakfast program, but it doesn't always meet every child's needs. So it's important to understand what barriers are being caused by traditional cafeteria breakfast. So as we know, traditional cafeteria breakfast is served in the morning before the school day starts, and students are required to eat in the cafeteria. So the barriers that this brings up are that students may not arrive in time to participate in the breakfast program, and this could be of no fault of their own. They might be a part of a bus or carpool system that just doesn't arrive early enough for students to participate in the breakfast program. We also know that there is stigma around students that participate in the breakfast program, that it's for low-income kids, and we've seen kids over and over again choose not to participate in the breakfast program because they would rather not be a part of that stigma that comes with that. And then we know that those students who are in middle and high schools have, a different sort of feeding pattern where they just might not be hungry first thing in the morning. And so they get to school, first period goes by, second period goes by, and then they're starving and they're hangry, and it does not present a good situation. And then the cafeteria may not be convenient for students, depending on the size of the campus or how the campus is laid out. Students may not have time to go to that cafeteria before their first period class starts and actually participate in the breakfast program. And then we also see that students like to socialize with other students in the morning. This might be the only time they really get to hang out with their friends during the school day. And so a lot of times we see if the choice is to socialize with their friends or eat breakfast in the cafeteria before the school day starts, which a lot of times it might be by themselves, they will definitely socialize instead and just deal with that hunger. So what is the solution? For us, it's clear that the solution is to make breakfast a part of the school day. Same thing as school lunch. By making breakfast a part of the school day, that means breakfast is served after the official start of the school day, and it's served in places where kids are, like classrooms and common areas. This addresses those barriers that I just talked about and ensures that you're meeting the needs of the kids, so that way kids can get a healthy meal to start their day and to last them to lunch. So let's talk a little bit about those breakfast after the bell models that I referenced earlier. And there are three models, the first one being breakfast in the classroom. So this is just a quick overview of what breakfast in the classroom actually is. This is where breakfast is offered and served in the classroom, just like the name states. Students are allowed to eat in the classroom. This is a big deal. If students don't have a place to eat, they're less likely to participate in the breakfast program. The process is very quick, takes about 15 minutes. That includes cleanup. So this is a very easy method of meeting the needs of the students in a quick way to get fuel in kids' bodies so they can last through lunch. And the pictures that I show basically are in order what happens with breakfast in the classroom. Picture number one, the cooler bags are getting lined up and breakfast is being placed in them by the cafeteria staff. Picture number two, we have a student volunteer that is bringing that breakfast to the classroom, and students play a huge role in these programs, and we want students to play a huge role because it gives students the opportunity to take on leadership roles and be more bought into the breakfast program if they are helping to facilitate the program. And then picture three, a student is grabbing her reimbursable meal components. And then picture number four is the equipment that is left over after the breakfast session, which needs to be brought back to the cafeteria, which again can be done by student volunteers. Next, we have grab and go. This is also pretty much exactly like it sounds. So breakfast is offered or served from one or more central locations. This is usually via a cart or kiosks, that are placed in high traffic areas, so that way we know kids are passing those carts. They pick up that breakfast and they head to class. We've also seen this done via quick cafeteria line, and that's another way for schools that maybe don't have carts readily available, or they don't have the upfront funding to purchase carts, to just add a quick cafeteria line so that students can go through that line, pick up the reimbursable meal, and head to class. So picture number 1 is an example of a cart stocked with delicious breakfast food there, ready for students to go through the line and take the reimbursable meal components. Picture number 2 is a student actually picking up breakfast, and as you can see, cart number 2 has hot items. That's something to think about as well, as a way for kids to be involved in the program. We hear a lot that students love hot meals. And then picture number 4 is the point of sale system. So this is different than breakfast in the classroom in that for grab and go, you have to account for students in some way. And so a POS system is definitely a requirement for this type of system. And so on the sides of the computer, you can see the pin pads. This might be for a cafeteria worker to enter in information, or student to enter in their pin in order to access their meals. And then picture number 4 is a trash can in the middle of the hallway. So this is where students would deposit their trash, or you'd have one of those student volunteers bring that classroom trash into the hallway and deposit it in this central location. And then the custodial staff just have to pick up the trash in that central trash can, as opposed to going to classroom, which can suck up a lot of time. And then finally, we have second chance breakfast, which is where breakfast is offered between first and second periods, or during a mid-morning break. And this really works well for those middle and high school students that just aren't hungry first thing in the morning. So this is a fantastic example of meeting the students where they're at and providing breakfast when students need them. So we've seen this done, sorry about that. We've seen this done in 2 different ways. One is that grab and go, where carts are set up in the hallway, so that way when first period gets out, students are going to their second period class, and on their way, they are grabbing that reimbursable meal, and then they go to second period and eat their breakfast. Quick cafeteria line can also suffice, depending on the layout of the school and the ease of the cafeteria. But we've also actually seen this where schools reopen their cafeteria, and they serve breakfast for 10 minutes or so, and provide students the opportunity to eat. So this requires a little bit more scheduling, but we see it very successfully, so that's another option. And here are the participation rates that we know that you can reach by implementing these 3 models. And keep in mind what you see here, the definitions of these models. We do see schools implement exactly like this, but we also see hybrids. So really, this can be a jumping off point for schools and districts to play around with these models and figure out what works best. But these are the general definitions. So when you look at the free and reduced cohort of students, and that cohort who is also eating school breakfast, that's what these participation rates represent. So out of the students who are free and reduced for breakfast in the classroom, 88% are eating breakfast, 59% are participating in grab and go, and 58% are participating in second chance breakfast. And as you can see at the very bottom of the slide, this analysis was done from over 2,000 schools in 14 states, and it's actually very new data that we're very happy to present. Okay, so now that we've level setted about breakfast and breakfast after the bell, we are now at our question and answer period. So we have lots of good time for questions. So my colleague Emily is going to be looking to see for folks if you are raising your hand and you have a question, or if you have a question in the chat box. But I'm going to kick us off by reading off the questions that folks submitted ahead of time when they registered for the webinar. And the first question I have is, do you have a best practice to train teachers about breakfast in the classroom meal count accountability? So I'm going to pass this question off to our expert, Marla. Marla, what do you have to say for that? Yes.
So I think what's really important is for all of us food service folks to realize that we're not in this alone. And in order for a program to be successful, we really have to get the input from those folks at the school, the teachers, the administrators. And I think you have to have a sit down, and you need to talk to the principal and bring in some teachers and find out if you may make some suggestions for what might work in a school. It may be in one school or in a group of classrooms. The children can check off their own names as they get a meal. And I'm more than happy to talk more about the various types of accountability, but I think it has to be a system that's developed that's mutually agreeable along with the school and the food service area. In terms of training, the first thing that I would do as we start a new breakfast program is I would bring all the staff together in a staff meeting, and I would tell them what the requirements about breakfast are and listen to all of their questions, to field their questions when everybody could hear what requirements are and what some of the breakfast rules and menu items are as far as breakfast is concerned. And then certainly create signage that is in the classroom so that the children can learn what's required of them. And I'm here to tell you that the children really aren't the problem. We adults tend to be a little bit more resistant to change. But once children are taught and told what they need to do, they will, for the most part, do it. One of the questions that comes up to us a lot is how much responsibility does a teacher have in the classroom? And that's a good question, because the teacher really has to oversee the process. The teacher does not need to be or should not be the distributor of food items to the students. So I hope that kind of answers the meat of that question. I'm happy to go further if there's a need.
That's fantastic, Marla. I think that was great information. And if folks want more information, feel free to just let us know in the chat box if you want us to go deeper on that question. But I think that was great information. Thank you, Marla.
Sure.
So our next question that was sent in ahead of time is, our district provides breakfast, but this person is concerned that it doesn't feed the brain. How can I make up for this deficit? So whoever sent this in, I actually have your name, but I don't want to announce it. If you are on the line, I'd love for you to just clarify what you mean when you say it doesn't feed the brain. What I do want to do, though, is let you know about some of the No Kid Hungry resources that we have. And oftentimes we see that folks don't quite understand that school breakfast has to abide by completely different nutrition standards than breakfast outside of the school. And so we actually have resources to showcase this. We have this resource called School Breakfast, Healthier Than You Think, that is helpful for teachers, principals, even parents that aren't in the school nutrition world, that wouldn't know about the robust nutrition standards that school meals must abide by in order to be a reimbursable meal. And in this resource, we even have a comparison of a store-bought item and a school breakfast item and the difference in the nutritional quality, because it is quite different. And so that's something important to note here. Something else I want to take the opportunity is to show you our Center for Best Practices website. Some of you may be familiar with our website, but this contains over 400 resources pertaining to school breakfast, summer meals, and after-school meals. And I want to take you through the website to show you where you can get a plethora of resources information relating to school breakfast. So as you can see, I clicked on the school breakfast page. We have all of these options here about school breakfast, but I am going to click on Implement Breakfast After the Bell for our purposes today. I'm going to click on Explore. And as you can see, we have all of these options to dive deeper on breakfast after the bell. So there's this whole section on engaging stakeholders. I'm going to click View More. And as you can see, this section opens up to reveal all of these resources here. Everything in orange is a hyperlinked resource. And so as I scroll down, my mouse is over School Breakfast Healthier Than You Think. This is where I got this resource. I highly recommend you take advantage of the resources that are on our website, and I will have this hyperlink in the PowerPoint. So in our follow-up email that I will send out, you will be able to link out to our website. And then something else is our Implementing a Successful Program, which has an extensive amount of implementation resources that we're really proud of. So I will go back to the webinar. Give me 1 second to do that. And did we get any clarification for that question? Okay, so I'm going to move on from that question. But if we do get clarification, we will revisit that. The next question that came in ahead of time is, how do you convince staff at a school eligible for CEP, but not where it would be certainly profitable to obtain CEP, to do breakfast after the bell? I have some thoughts on this, but Marla, I'm going to kick it over to you first, and then if I have anything else, I will add in after you're finished.
Okay. I'm going to make the assumption that convincing staff is school staff, not food service staff. And I would also make the assumption that profitable means that the ISP is over 40%, but less than 62.5%, but yet free and reduced numbers are fairly high. So I'm making that assumption. If I'm not correct, please type into the chat box or ask the question. And so to answer that question, I think you have to have a conversation starting with the principal. Hopefully you either have a relationship with the principal at a particular school, or you have a relationship with the principal at another school that you could call on for the two principals to talk. And you want to present the fact that breakfast is important and give the reasons why. And to Summer's point, you may even want to relate that during testing week how important they might serve snacks, or they might serve items in the morning because they know that the test scores will be better. So it's really having that conversation about the outcomes from eating breakfast and the importance of breakfast. And then telling the story and talking about what other options are available that are not CEP, and telling the story of why CEP is perhaps not an option at that school. So the genuine conversation and hopefully the commitment on the part of the principal is what starts that conversation. And then you can talk about all of the options, whether it's breakfast in the classroom or a grab-and-go cart, or having all of the students come through the cafeteria at no cost, which is another option that we can certainly talk about if there are questions around that. Could be implemented to get more children to have breakfast in the morning.
Thanks, Marla. I will only add that when you're talking about breakfast after the bell and you're talking to those school stakeholders, reminding the school stakeholders that CEP is only one piece of the puzzle, or providing universal meals, I guess I should say, whether it's CEP or Provision 2 or other ways, is only one piece of the puzzle that solves or addresses one of the barriers. So financial constraints are one of the barriers for students. Even if you provide universal meals, you still have those barriers that I talked about earlier on in the webinar, where maybe the time isn't convenient, the location breakfast is served isn't convenient, there's stigma that students are dealing with, or students just aren't hungry first thing in the morning. And so this is why you have these other models, these breakfast after the bell models, to really address these other barriers, so that way you are providing students a real opportunity to access breakfast in a way that makes sense for them. So providing a more holistic picture of maybe why students aren't participating in the program, or that, providing universal meals is only one piece of the puzzle to really creating a successful breakfast program where, all students or the vast majority of the students are participating. All right. Anything more, Marla, to add there?
No, that was a very good point, Summer.
Okay, great. So one of the other questions that we got was very specific to a district. The question describes the district as they have 8 schools with universal free breakfast. They are 50% free and reduced. They say they're slowly serving more paid students, but they want to know how to reach more free and reduced students without actually targeting free and reduced students. So I kind of think the answer is similar to the answer from the previous question in terms of, so you're already serving universal free, but you want to be able to serve more students in that free and reduced cohort without, singling them out. I think breakfast after the bell is a fantastic way to do that because you level the playing field, by bringing breakfast into the classroom or in common areas after the official start of the school day and making it a part of the school day, the same way that you do school lunch. You remove that stigma, and so you're removing the need to target the free and reduced students. It's more about student health and wellness. It's more about breakfast for all students because you're meeting the need of all students. And when you do that, you're also meeting the needs of the free and reduced students. Marla, what do you think?
I think that's great. The only thing I would add to that is make breakfast exciting. Put flyers out. You're targeting the entire population. You're reaching the free and reduced students as well as the paid students, but make it fun. Make breakfast an exciting part of the day. Depending on the circumstances at a school, go to the principal and pull together a focus group. Get some students together, hopefully a diverse group, some that are free and reduced eligible, some that are full paid, you won't know, and empower them. Get their ideas of, make them become ambassadors, and what could make you and your student colleagues eat more breakfast. Have them help you with menu ideas. Bring some positive energy around breakfast, and I'm going to guess that your paid as well as your free and reduced meal counts will go up.
Awesome addition there. And Emily, can I have the Center for Best Practices website up again? Because I also have some resources to showcase regarding student engagement. So implementing a successful program, actually engaging stakeholders. Let's go back to this. So we have a whole section for students, which has competition examples. We have school breakfast promotion strategies. So these are things you can take advantage of on our website. And actually, one of our questions that came in ahead of time was what resources are out there to help with the delivery of breakfast after the bell. And so I want to show you our other section because we have a very dense website. So folks may not know what we all have to offer in terms of our resources, but we really work hard to create these resources, and we do a lot of research in order to create resources that make sense for folks in the field. So here we have our pre-implementation checklist, which I have open to show you. And it has a list of things you can do to get ready for breakfast after the bell. And this was created by asking school nutrition directors around the country, how would you help districts that are thinking about this? What would you tell them? What would you advise them? And so we even have a checklist at the very end, so you can really be strategic with how to get ready for implementing breakfast after the bell. We also have rollout timelines that give you very specific information about how to think about rolling out a breakfast after the bell program and what kind of timeline you might need and what stakeholders need to do, because every school, every stakeholder in the school district is important for this program. So we have a breakfast in the classroom rollout timeline, and we have a grab and go to the classroom rollout timeline. And all of these can be found on our Center for Best Practices, Implementing a Successful Program. Again, this will be sent to you, but we also have an equipment tip sheet, which is something that the question asked as well. Let's see, which also gives you ideas about what equipment to purchase, what's appropriate for you, how to assess what your program needs. So again, these resources do exist. They're just at the tip of your finger on the Center for Best Practices website in the school breakfast section. All right, let's see. There was a question that came in regarding Washington State and about their new breakfast after the bell law. I am happy to connect you, and I have your email, to the United Way of King County, who is one of our partners who has been instrumental in helping schools implement breakfast after the bell based on the legislation. Something else you can do is go to washingtonbreakfast.org, and there's so much great information about breakfast after the bell. But ultimately, with any breakfast after the bell legislation, I highly encourage you to contact your state agency. So I will email you information about that. Just wanted to let you know that we've got your question and we are happy to help you. And then another question that came in ahead of time was about grab and go carts and ideas to increase meal participation. So I think Marla did a great job of talking about how to get students excited and get student engagement. And so I would echo a lot of that. But Marla, do you have any specifics for grab and go carts and using those to promote or increase meal participation?
The only other thing that I would add is work with your schools and see about presenting at school staff meetings. Your school staff can be your best friend or not your best friend. And it would be really great for you to have the opportunity to meet with school staff, teachers, paras, and talk about your breakfast program and that it is healthy and why the menu is the way it is, and talk about the federal requirements. I mean, give them the power of knowing why you do what you do for breakfast. And then the other is reaching out to parents. See if you can get on an agenda to a PTA meeting. And so parents can put a name to an entity which they never see when they're in the school building, and let them realize that they're real people that are caring about their kids and creating healthy menus and healthy breakfasts to keep their kids healthy and successful.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm now going to go to the questions that folks typed into the chat box. The first question is, are you able to find out what make and model the cart is on that grab and go slide in picture number 2? They're saying it's the cart that has the warming station for hot items. I don't know that picture. Let's see, there we go, picture number 2. I can certainly try to find out, but Marla, do you have any?
Sure, I do. I've got equipment books. I'll be happy to do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, we'll follow up then with that. The next question is about, it says second breakfast models. I assume that means second chance. It says, can we offer the first breakfast before the bell and one during the first count and one during the first count as a second chance breakfast? Okay, so I think what you're asking is, can they still offer breakfast before the bell, breakfast before the school day starts, and have second chance breakfast as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the thing you can't do is you can't claim 2 breakfasts. So you could keep your breakfast session open after breakfast, and then if there's a session, a break in between classes and kids come into the cafeteria, if it's their second meal, then they would end up being rung up as an a la carte, but they would know that after the first time, but a student that hadn't gotten breakfast would then be rung up as receiving breakfast. So absolutely, that's the whole point.
Yeah. All right, and then the next question is, do you have any suggestions to get teachers on board? This person says, some of our teachers and principals do not support the breakfast in the classroom program. Marla, I'm going to pass this to you because I know you have great teacher and principal engagement strategies.
So I really think that you have to have that conversation with the teacher. You need to explain to them why, and I'm going to guess that, you know, it's all carbohydrates. How can you call that healthy? And have the conversation explaining to them what students will eat and why certain items are on the menu, and get their input. I know that, you know, many years ago, I had a school that they said they wanted to change the menu. It's fine, as long as the menu meets the guidelines. If teachers and administrators have buy-in and their suggestions are heard, they become the ambassadors, and they're going to encourage kids to consume breakfast. So pull them closer to you. Sometimes if you can, if you have the opportunity, go to a staff meeting and bring samples. Let them taste, let them understand that your French toast sticks are a whole grain French toast stick, that they're, you know, that they meet the guidelines, and this is why you serve them. So honestly, instead of pushing back, have those conversations and bring them into your world.
Wonderful. Next question, it says, our breakfast in the classroom programs received a lot of returns on food. What can we do to stop this from happening? Do we have to throw away all of the food that comes back? Marla, I'm passing this to you.
Sure. So at the beginning of the school year, every classroom is going to get the number of full meals for all the students in each classroom. As the school year rolls out, you're using a production sheet, and you can then gauge how many full meals to send to each classroom, which should reduce the amount of items that come back. To prevent that, so if you're seeing that classrooms are consuming less and less, then it's time to reach out and find out why. And sometimes, you know, no offense, but sometimes it's not the menu. It could be the quality, or by the time the meals are being served, the wrap is sticking to the bagel and it's not very appetizing. So it's digging a little bit deeper and trying to find out why the meals are coming back or why consumption is less. That's also a perfect opportunity to have that focus group and listen to the kids, listen to the staff, and change the menu if appropriate. To answer the question about food items being thrown out, as long as it's not a potentially hazardous food and has been out of temperature for more than an hour and a half, it's fine to reuse that item. However, you want to make sure that the quality of the item isn't compromised. The bagel is a great example. So you could warm a bagel and have it sent to the classroom and have it come back and then reheat it the next day. Likelihood is that it's not going to be a very good product. So my suggestion is to really gauge your production sheets and then send accordingly. One of the other sort of best practices that we developed is one classroom in a hallway might have extras, so that when you're scaling back based on consumption of previous days, then there's a classroom that the teacher or the kids can go to get a full meal if they run out in their classroom.
Great. And we only have 1 minute left, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So this last slide just highlights the school breakfast resources that are available on the Center for Best Practices website, which I showcased earlier. A reminder, it has over 400 resources, so I highly encourage you to take advantage of that. I have the school breakfast section hyperlinked out. So again, when we send the follow-up email and you can review these slides, you can click on this and it will directly take you to the website. But we also have a monthly newsletter that the Center for Best Practices puts out that talks about our latest and greatest resources, any upcoming webinars, any events that we have coming up, and really just what's happening in the school meals world at that point in time. So please sign up for our newsletter. You learn a lot of information about the Center for Best Practices and No Kid Hungry, and then you can stay in the loop with other webinars and information that might be helpful. So I want to thank Marla so much for being our expert on the webinar. We are out of time. Thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.